Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream.
And I'm Malika Bilal. Today, how do you turn a moment into a movement? We're discussing a new theory on power in the 21st century with the authors of the book, New Power.
So tweet us your thoughts and your questions, or you can comment in our live YouTube chat, and you too could be with Malika and myself in the stream.
Hi, I'm Alex Salkever, the author of The Driver and the Driverless Car, How Our Technology Can Change the Future, and you are in the stream.
Strength in numbers is the idea that a group of people has more influence than just one person, and that the collective is stronger as a whole.
It's also one of the guiding principles in New Power. That's a book about the power dynamics in the 21st century.
How do we make sense of a world where the unexpected keeps happening? From the rise of Barack Obama or Donald Trump, from the movements like Me Too to the mega platforms like Facebook and Uber. What's driving all these phenomena is the rise of new power. New power is the essential skill of the 21st century, the ability to harness the energy of the connected crowd and get the outcomes that you seek. And we're seeing this deployed for good and for bad. Look at the alt-right. Look at the way in which they're taking memes and ideas to spread their dangerous messages around the world. And look too on the side of hope. Look at the way people are galvanizing around gun control, around refugees issues, to get the outcomes they want. Whoever mobilizes is going to win, and if you end up understanding new power, you can end up on top. Welcome to the New Power world.
So this is going to be an interesting show because we don't have our two authors with us yet. We are keeping our fingers crossed. This shows you that this is a live show. We were hoping that in Dallas, in Texas, we're going to have to discuss the new idea of New Power. Co-authors of the book, Henry Timms and Jeremy Heimans. They are standing by. They were just testing to see if I have a couple of extra grey hairs. While we get them set up, Malika and I took a quiz, which is a New Power quiz. If you look on my Twitter feed, you will find it at FemiOK. And I am a crowd leader. And I asked you what kind of leader you might well be. And there are options. There are co-opters, castles, crowds, and cheerleaders. Apparently, I am a crowd leader. Malika, what did you end up being?
I am between a crowd leader and a cheerleader, but my favorite answer could be from one of our stream producers here. This is Ellie, and she took the quiz as well. She is between the Pope and Lady Gaga. So we're gonna give you a little teaser there and have our audience stay tuned for what those two people have in common.
And we will tell you how to test to see where you fit in New Power or Old Power a little bit later in the program. But Jeremy Heimans and Henry Timms, welcome to the show. Good to have you here.
Lovely to be here.
Wonderful to be here.
If there was a poster child, poster person, poster man or woman for New Power and one for Old Power, who would you pick?
Well, I think interestingly, it would almost be that the poster child for New Power would not be one person. So, we talk a lot in the book about the Black Lives Matter founders and their philosophy of leadership, which they describe as being leaderful. So a movement in which there's no one kind of charismatic leader, at the top, speechifying, in which all of the energy and focus ladders up, but rather one in which many leaders can emerge through a movement that works more like a current. And so I think the counterintuitive answer on that is there's no one answer.
All right.
And if you wanted an old power archetype, you'd think about Harvey Weinstein.
Okay.
So, he kind of hoarded up all this power. It was very much about him. He could, keep greenlight movies. He could start careers. He could stop careers. He had all of that power in his hands and could spend it when he chose to. And that's a very different way of exercising power than leaders who are thriving in the New Power world.
And of course, as they're talking, our audience might recognize Harvey Weinstein behind my shoulder there. That is why he is in one of our panels there. You'll see it in the wide shots. But gentlemen, I wanted to bring up another potential example. This is Occupy Wall Street. H.D. Flores writes in that Occupy Wall Street prided itself on a leaderless style movement. However, it led to its downfall because it fell victim to conflicting goals, inner competition of who will speak on behalf of the group, the strategy, etc. Groups like Black Lives Matter and Me Too learned from that failure. And he goes on to say those two movements face a far weaker opposition than groups like Occupy Wall Street, who tackle wealth inequality. Wealthy elites can use their resources to tackle issues of police brutality and sexual harassment, but it's harder to do when they're considered the problem. No, I wouldn't agree with that second comment personally. I think white supremacy is a really big issue that Black Lives Matter is facing, but I'm wondering where you think Occupy Wall Street and the other groups he mentions fall in that spectrum.
Well, I think it depends how you think about success. So I think one easy read is kind of Occupy wasn't a success because it didn't turn into like a membership organization where they had chapters in every state and was still going strong 4 years on. But the other way of thinking about Occupy is it was a good example of actually what new power can achieve, because what actually happened with Occupy was all of that energy shifted a cultural narrative. It actually opened up a kind of horizon of engagement that other organizations then came in to fill. So the more generous interpretation of Occupy, although I think it did have some challenges in terms of decision making, was it began a relay process. And then you follow that arc for the success of books like Thomas Piketty's work. You think about organizations like the Ford Foundation, who have now put all of their focus around the strategy of addressing inequality. And you think how much inequality is now talked about and addressed as an issue across the US and beyond. I think you'd have to credit Occupy for starting a relay of change that went from them to other institutions.
But I think your reviewer is right that we're seeing some promising signs in movements like Me Too, which are perhaps taking the energy that Occupy was able to generate around something really structural, in this case misogyny, but are also kind of consolidating that. So, you know, the Time's Up kind of offspring, if you like, of the Me Too movement sort of took that energy, consolidated it. Now, what the Occupy Wall Street movement were really ideologically opposed to was any kind of real consolidation of that energy. And I do think that that was a constraint.
So, gents, I want to make sure that our audience watching globally have got a really good grasp on this idea of what new power is, what old power is. And thanks to you, I've got a visualization. Let's play a little bit of Tetris. Here we go. All right, Henry, explain. What's Tetris doing here?
Well, you're doing very well there, Femi. That's an impressive start. So Tetris, if you think about old power, the old power mindset expected the world to operate like Tetris. It was top down, the rules were set by somebody else. Your job was simply to make things fit into neat lines again and again and again until eventually you collapsed. And a lot of our institutions treated people that way. They wanted people to fit into the game of Tetris where they set the rules. And that's very different to the new power world, which isn't working like Tetris. It's working like a very different game, which is Minecraft.
Oh, I've got Minecraft just here. Talk us through Minecraft and why that is the representation of new power.
So what's so interesting about Minecraft, it's also a block-based game, just like Tetris, but the entire universe of Minecraft is created by the people using it. There are no rules, really, that govern Minecraft. Everyone is creating vast worlds within this space. You know, there's this story we tell of the earnest people of Norway who recreated the entire state of Norway in Minecraft until an American at the very last minute plants an American flag right in the center of the country. It's a story for our age. But the point is that Minecraft is made by many. It's a product of the energy that its participants put into it. And that's a really good way of thinking about these differences between a model based on mass participation, like Minecraft, and a model that's more based on compliance, which is Tetris.
And so I think the question for leaders, what the book is about, is saying we all knew the skills of approaching the world as if it played like Tetris, where the institutions had all the power and we dropped things down and people did limited things. And now we're in this world of participation. Everyone wants to add their voice, wants to be involved, wants to be engaged. You know, look at the stream as an example of an effort to try and engage with the crowd in more meaningful ways. So the question the book addresses is how you develop a set of skills that allow you to deal with a world where people expect Minecraft dynamics, not this Tetris mindset.
So Jeremy and Henry, a question here that arises is what happens when you have a new power model, but they're using old power ideas and values? And I bring up Facebook as an example because we got a video comment from a member of our community and a person who's also a journalist and an author. He wrote The Big Bubble. This is what he told the stream.
It's important here to remember that has never in the history of mankind been so much power concentrated in one single company. Through Facebook, they control more than 1 billion people and how we see our world, how we appreciate what's happening around us, and the way we interpret And the way the algorithms shape our worldview is important to understand more about, and that's why we need much more transparency from them. I imagine it being sort of like when you buy food and there's an ingredient list on the backside. There should be something similar on Facebook, the way you can say that these are the factors we take into consideration when doing the algorithm, and this is how they will affect you. They don't need to disclose the recipe, but they need to know the ingredients that goes into it.
So where would you put Facebook on the new power versus old power? And also, what's your take on whether or not there should be a ingredients label?
We couldn't agree more. I mean, I think, so really what the book's about is saying that the people who are best able to harness our participatory energies to mobilize people are the people who are getting ahead. And Facebook is such a good example of that, right? They're brilliantly bringing billions of people together. The question is then what you do once you've harnessed that energy. And I think what we do in the book is describe Facebook as a co-opter, because they're taking new power, but really they're then extracting a lot of value from the very people that they're trying to engage. And so I think we agree, and we propose in the book, the idea that this algorithm, it shouldn't be like Colonel Sanders' secret herbs and spices. You know, we should have some visibility into that algorithm. We should be able to turn a dial and say, I want to hear from different kinds of voices. These are the people that I want in my newsfeed. And I think even, you know, we've argued in the book that there should be a public interest test applied to that algorithm, because Facebook has just become such a critical arena for democracy. So the big question is, this new power is going to get used by someone. The question is by who? And the work of the book really is partly trying to make sure that it gets into the right hands.
Jeremy and Henry, you put this really well, but Pope Francis did this before you. In 2017, he did a TED Talk, and he talked about changes in power and how people can have access to that power. Have a listen.
Quanto più sei potente, quanto più le tue azioni hanno un impatto sulla gente, tanto più sei chiamato a essere umile. Perché altrimenti il potere ti rovina e tu rovinerai gli altri. Il futuro dell'umanità non è solo nelle mani dei politici, dei grandi leader, delle grandi aziende. Sì, la loro responsabilità è enorme, ma il futuro è soprattutto nelle mani delle persone che riconoscono l'altro come un tu e se stessi come parte di un noi.
Pope Francis, he gets it. One of the things that struck me by what you were trying to do in sharing your philosophy, this idea of a power structure change, is that you're doing it via telling parables, telling stories. Did you actually do anything yourself other than curate the stories?
In what sense, Femi?
You're looking at new power and the way that it is being used. Did you use new power yourself? Did you go and see the people? One of the stories was about NASA and NASA crowdsourcing. Did you go out and get dirty telling your stories?
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting things, when we first wrote about this in Harvard Business Review, I guess 4 years ago, and then Jeremy did a TED Talk, one of the things which was so interesting was you started to see people grabbing this work and taking it somewhere you didn't expect. They got the frame of old power and new power, and they said, okay, I can see how this works in my world, so I'm going to take it somewhere new. So I'll give you an example of a group we really learned a lot from. They're a group of health workers in the NHS in England, and they had read the original article, and they'd taken the bones of the article and actually built a whole set of tools, a curriculum, some training, some open source programming around the idea of how health professionals can become more powerful themselves using some of the techniques that the article kicked off. So one of the most interesting kind of inputs into putting the book together itself was learning from these members of the community who had grabbed the initial ideas and made them better. And what's been great about the book is it's been out now for 2.5, 3 weeks. People have now finished reading the book, and what we're already seeing is people who have grabbed the ideas and are making them more interesting, more relevant, more valid. And that's the goal of this work, as Jeremy pointed out earlier. The book is just the beginning of a conversation we want to start, which is those people who are acting, on the side of the angels need to get good at this stuff quick. And what we're going to spend the years ahead doing is really encouraging and fostering that community so that new power ends up, just as the Pope said, making more people more powerful.
So Jeremy, Henry, of course, we heard the Pope in that little clip there, and we also tweeted that example out to our community, asking them what they thought. And there was an interesting response from Chris Tierney on Twitter. He says, that's not leadership, it's PR. He says the church still opposes homosexuality, same-sex marriage, contraception, abortion, the separation of church and state. It's still actively covering up child abuse, even after thousands of cases of rape were uncovered. And therefore, he doesn't think that's actually an example of new power. I'm wondering what your take on that is, given what I teased our audience with, this spectrum of leadership. Pope Francis can be compared to Lady Gaga in some ways. Can you explain for our audience?
Absolutely. So I think, the Pope is obviously, and the Catholic Church is a complicated organization. It's really the oldest of all power institutions. But what we're so interested in is what the Pope is doing to move that organization, which is never easy, right? And we would argue he's doing more than just PR. So yes, there were these very powerful symbolic gestures about empowering, the lay parishioners when he became Pope. But he is also trying to structure full participation. He's really gone after the entrenched corruption in the church, the Vatican Bank, etc. He was actually the first Pope in the history of the papacy to actually ask regular parishioners what they thought about the church. And I think it's a very interesting question about doctrine, right? So you're absolutely right that the doctrine on homosexuality, on reproductive rights, has not really changed. But what he has tried to do, understanding that he has only a limited amount of leverage, really, even as Pope, is he's shifted the norms. So he famously says, when asked about homosexuality, who am I to judge? And what he was doing there was basically pushing decision-making about those issues deeper down into the church rather than imposing doctrine from on high. So I think there's a lot we can learn from Pope Francis, especially given the entrenched old power institution he's in, even though he's by no means a perfect figure.
Gentlemen, are we just talking about technology and digital and access and the way that the world is opened up? Is that what starts new power? I was wondering, is there a date or an era when it started? And does it have a sell-by date?
Well, I think it's definitely the case that the technology has shifted really a set of expectations and capacities. So if you think about Jeremy as a lifetime activist, and so at 13 years old, you can imagine him, he had a fax machine, and he was chasing world leaders around the world, sending earnest faxes to their hotels, imploring them to stop the Iraqi war. Now, this was not a successful campaign. Cut forward to... I'm sorry.
It really wasn't.
Well, I mean, I thought you were claiming I thought you were claiming a breakthrough that had been previously undiscovered.
So let me, Henry, if I may, let me just show people some of the things that Jeremy was doing when he was younger. This is his TEDx talk, so you can look at that and you'll see that when he was a little...
He wasn't 13 in that picture. Right?
No, he wasn't. It's just moved on a little bit, but in his TEDx talk, you can see him as a young man actually doing incredible activism at a really, really young age. Carry on.
And you think about how that activism has changed. So let's just take an example from the news recently. Look at the Parkland kids who have think about the tools of participation they had in their hand. Jeremy, as a young activist, has a fax machine. He sends these faxes around the world to hotels in vain. These Parkland kids have access to this extraordinary connected network who don't just have the ability to participate, they have the expectation to participate. So what New Power is about is in a world where the speed, the scale, the kind of cross-sectoral application of this work is so much vaster than it used to be. How do you, if you're trying to get change in the world, take advantage of all of these people who don't just want to consume, they want to create?
And it's a different set of skills, right? These Parkland kids, as Henry said, demonstrated so fabulously. If I had those tools in my hands, there's no doubt I could do more than I did then. But there's so much opportunity out there. The problem is not everybody knows how to use those skills. So the skills of mobilizing your employees or the people you have formal authority over are very different to how you get a much larger community or crowd engaged. And that's what we're trying to pass out in the book. What are those genuinely new skills in a world in which everybody potentially can play that role that those Parkland kids are playing?
So I want to juxtapose two things for you both. So the first is a live comment we just got on YouTube. This is Jay Jenkins, who says, Donald Trump is swimming in new power. A second is a video comment. This is Arun, and he's a professor and author of The Sharing Economy. And this is what he had to tell the stream.
Hi, I'm Arun Sundarajan. I'm a professor at New York University, author of The Sharing Economy. Hi, Henry and Jeremy. Loving the book, as you know. There's so much insight your framework provides into why the sharing economy has emerged and why it's persisted. So my question for you is about new power hitting up against the systematic misinformation on social media that we've been witnessing over the last couple of years. Do you think that this increases the importance of local physical world networks in making online movements succeed?
So some would say that those two comments there are related. On the one hand, you have misinformation, and the other hand, you have someone who some would accuse the Trump campaign and administration of wallowing in that misinformation. I'd like your take on that.
Well, it's certainly true that the people who are spreading misinformation and lies, and I would certainly include Donald Trump in that, do start at an advantage, unfortunately, because they're unconstrained by facts. They're unconstrained by, the ability to provoke extremism. So there's no doubt that you can do that more easily. I think getting people together in real life, building real community, is an important antidote to it. But it's also important that those of us who want to build a different kind of world to the Donald Trump worldview actually mobilize on social media with the same passion and intensity. If you think about that election, it was the intensity that his supporters had. It was the fact that he would retweet a white supremacist, and the signal he sent was, I want you to be more powerful. Those of us in a different mind space need to also generate passion and intensity. The facts will not simply be enough.
So the whole question is, what is the point of this? What is the point of the book? The book is to be aware of where you are in this spectrum and then work out how to leverage this new power that you have. One of the ways that you entice people with trying this out is a quiz. Who put the quiz together? Was it a psychiatrist?
It was definitely not a psychiatrist. We developed the framework based on the research that we did for the book, and it's a really useful tool for people to figure out where are they now? What are their mindsets? Are they skilled in this new power world? Because most of us understand old power, right? The question is, have we got these new set of skills to go alongside them?
And I think it's also a question about, you ask yourself a set of human questions. So we often confuse what's changing with the world as it's just something to do with social media, right? So we finally have to understand how Snapchat works or what we're doing about LinkedIn. But it's actually about professional identity, right? So are you prepared to be someone who can kind of work out how to solve problems collaboratively, how to work with the crowd, how to engage more broadly? Or are you someone who is still essentially kind of issuing your press releases onto the world and expecting people to pay attention? And the beginning of that isn't really about digital life at all. It's actually about how you think about your own power in the world. And that's the conversation that the book wanted to provoke. But we also have a very strong bias that those people who are doing the work which matters so much right now, you think about the climate scientists or the health workers or the Enlightenment voices, people who are trying to make the world more just. Mm-hmm. Those are the people who have to get armed with new power because their opponents are doing some of this stuff really well. You think about kind of the climate deniers, the anti-vaxxers, the internet crazies. They're really good at new power. And those people who are tending to the institutions we all care about most, they need to learn these new power skills if they're not going to fall behind.
And it's also incredibly important to anyone just working in an institution or a company and trying to make change within that company. So we really help people navigate just ordinary change, including at that very local level. If you're trying to rebuild your organization, make it more transparent, make it more collaborative, we try to provide some really granular tools that people can use because this work is quite subtle. Right, a lot of it is about culture. It isn't something that
Jeremy,
you can just
Henry, I know you can talk. You talk for 24 minutes. Malika, where should we leave the conversation?
I'll leave with H.G. Flores, who says methods of leadership have to evolve with the generation they wish to lead. And if not, they'll become a relic of history rather than an institution of the future.
Jeremy Heimans and Henry Timms, they are the authors of New Power. Thank you for being on the stream today. Really appreciated your time.
Thanks so much.
All right, take care.
Thank you.